The road out of Jericho is loud. It is the kind of loud that only happens when a crowd is moving together with purpose, sandals on dry dirt, voices overlapping, children running ahead of their mothers, merchants stepping aside to watch. There are pilgrims heading to Jerusalem for Passover. There are disciples arguing about who will sit closest to the throne. There is a teacher at the center of all of it, walking with the kind of quiet focus that makes everyone around him feel like something important is about to happen. And then from the side of the road a voice breaks through everything. "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me!" The crowd tightens. People look toward the sound. A man is sitting in the dust at the edge of the road, his cloak pulled around him, his eyes fixed on nothing because his eyes have never fixed on anything. He is blind. He is a beggar. His name is Bartimaeus, which in Aramaic means son of Timaeus. And it is one of the only names of a healed person that Mark bothers to record, which means this story was remembered, which means people kept telling it, which means something happened here that would not let itself be forgotten. The crowd's response is immediate. "Be quiet." They rebuke him. The Greek word used here is epitoma, the same word used when Jesus silences storms. The crowd uses it on a blind man sitting in the dirt. They try to shut him down with the same force you would use to stop a hurricane. And for a moment you have to sit with how ordinary that was, how normal it felt to them. Of course you tell the beggar to stop yelling. Of course you keep moving. There are important things happening here. Important people walking. Important conversations to have. But Bartimaeus does not stop. He cries out all the more, louder, more desperate. And then in one of the most understated sentences in the entire Gospel of Mark it says, "And Jesus stopped." 2 words in English, 1 moment in time, and the entire crowd had to stop with him. Here is what most people miss about this story. Jesus was not on a leisurely walk. He was on the final approach to Jerusalem. He knew what was waiting for him there: the arrest, the trial, the cross. He had told his disciples 3 times already. 3 times he had laid it out plainly, and 3 times they had responded by arguing about who would be greatest in the kingdom. The weight on his shoulders in that moment was not abstract. It was specific, and it was enormous. And in the middle of carrying that weight, walking toward his own death, he heard one man yelling from the side of a road, and he stopped. That is the first thing you need to understand about this video. What we are about to look at together is not just a collection of healing miracles. It is a pattern, a deliberate, repeated, unmistakable pattern that runs from the opening of Jesus' ministry to its final day, 7 times across 4 Gospels, in different regions, in different crowds, with different kinds of suffering. Jesus stopped what he was doing for someone the rest of the world had already decided to walk past. And in every single case, the person he stopped for was someone nobody else would touch. Before we go any further, you need to understand what that meant in the first century, because we have sanitized it. We live in a world where the word outcast is metaphorical. We say someone is on the margins, and we mean it as a figure of speech. In the world of first century Judea, it was not a figure of speech. It was a legal status. It was a physical boundary. It was a line in the dirt that you did not cross. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in his Antiquities in the first century, describes how the law of Moses was applied in his time to those with skin disease, what the texts call leprosy, though the Hebrew word sara'at covered a range of conditions. They were excluded from the city. They were required to call out unclean, unclean when anyone approached, so that people could move away before contact was made. They could not touch the temple. They could not participate in worship. They were, in the most literal sense, cut off from the community of God's people. And it was not just those with skin disease. The woman who bled for years was ritually unclean under the same legal framework. Everything she touched became unclean. Everyone who touched her became unclean. The blind beggar sitting in the road was not just poor. In the first century world, physical disability was widely understood as divine punishment. The disciples of Jesus themselves believed this. We will see that in one of these stories. We will watch them ask out loud, standing right next to a man born blind, who sinned, this man or his parents? This was the world Jesus walked through. Not a world of metaphorical exclusion, a world where people kept physical distance from the sick, the bleeding, the blind, and the broken, not out of cruelty, but out of legal, religious, social obligation. And into that world, into that system, into that distance, into that silence, Jesus walked. The first person he stopped for was not Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus comes near the end of the ministry. The first person was earlier, much earlier, when Jesus had barely begun. And what happened in that encounter set the tone for everything that followed. Mark chapter 1. Jesus has just healed in the synagogue. He has driven out an unclean spirit. Word is spreading. Crowds are starting to form. He is moving through Galilee, teaching and healing, and his reputation is growing with every village he enters. And then a man with leprosy came to him. Not from the edge of the crowd, not from the road. He came close. He knelt down, and he said something that is so raw, so honest, that you can hear the years of rejection packed inside it. "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Not if you are able. He knew Jesus was able. He had heard the stories. What he did not know, what he had every reason to doubt, was whether Jesus was willing, whether Jesus would want to, whether Jesus would look at him the way everyone else did, with distance, with discomfort, with that particular kind of pity that keeps its hands to itself. And the text says Jesus was filled with compassion. The Greek word is splanchnizomai. It does not mean polite sympathy. It does not mean theological concern for the man's condition. Splanchnizomai comes from the word for intestines, for the gut. It means compassion that you feel physically, in your body, before your mind has a chance to organize it into a proper response. It means Jesus felt this man's rejection the way you feel a punch, not as an idea, as a sensation. And then, and this is the moment that changes the entire story, he reached out his hand and touched him. He did not pray from a distance. He did not speak a word and let the word do the work. He reached out in front of everyone, in violation of every social and religious convention of his time, and he made contact with the one person in that region who no one had touched in who knows how long. The text does not say, but you can imagine. You can imagine what it means to go days, weeks, months, years without a single human being touching your skin, and then a hand reaches out. By the time we get to story number 6, you are going to see that this moment, this touch, was not a coincidence. It was a declaration. Jesus was not just healing bodies. He was demolishing a system that had told certain people they were untouchable, and he was doing it one stop at a time. There is a woman in this story who never meant to stop Jesus. She was not sitting by the road calling out. She was not kneeling in the dust asking for anything. She had spent 12 years learning not to ask. 12 years of doctors who could not help her. 12 years of money spent until there was no money left. 12 years of the slow erosion that happens when you are sick and broken, invisible all at once, when you have tried everything and nothing has worked, and you have quietly, privately, stopped believing that anything will. She had heard about Jesus, and she had formed a plan that required almost nothing from him. She would not ask, she would not call out, she would not make a scene, she would just get close enough, touch the edge of his garment, just the hem, just the fringe, and then disappear back into the crowd before anyone noticed. It was the plan of someone who had been turned away so many times that she no longer believed she deserved a direct answer. She was not going to ask Jesus to stop. She was going to take the smallest possible thing and vanish. She reached out, she touched the fringe of his robe, and immediately Luke tells us her bleeding stopped. And then Jesus stopped. He stood still in the middle of a pressing, moving, jostling crowd and said, "Who touched me?" His disciples thought he had lost his mind. "Master, the crowd is surrounding you and pressing against you, and you say, 'Who touched me?' Everyone is touching you. That is what crowds do." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I felt power go out from me." Here is what this moment means, and it is something most teachers rush past. Jesus did not stop because he needed information. He is the Son of God. He knew exactly who had touched him. He stopped because he refused to let this woman be an anonymous miracle. He refused to let her slip away healed but still hidden, still invisible, still convinced that she had to take things in secret because no one would give them to her directly. He stopped the crowd. He stood still. He waited. And she came forward, trembling, Luke says, falling at his feet, and told him the whole truth, every bit of it. 12 years, all the doctors, all the money, all the failed attempts, the whole story that she had never told anyone because no one had ever asked. And Jesus said, "Daughter." That is the only time in all 4 Gospels that Jesus addresses a woman with that word. Daughter. Not woman, not friend, daughter. It is a word of belonging, a word that says, you are not an interruption, you are not a complication, you are not someone who had to steal a healing in the dark. You are mine, you have always been mine, and I want the whole crowd to know it. If you have ever taken something from God in secret, ever prayed quietly in the car because you were embarrassed to be seen needing something, this story is for you. Jesus does not want your quiet, private desperation. He wants your whole story, and he will stop a crowd to hear it. Now subscribe to this channel if this is your first time here, because we are only halfway through these stories, and what is coming next is going to ask you a question you might not be ready for. The third stop happens in a place you might not expect. Not on a road, not in a synagogue, on a boundary line. Luke chapter 17, Jesus is traveling between Samaria and Galilee, which is itself a detail worth pausing on, because Jews in the first century did not travel through Samaria if they could help it. The tension between Jewish and Samaritan communities ran centuries deep, but Jesus took that road deliberately, and what happened on it is one of the strangest encounters in all 4 Gospels. 10 men with leprosy met him at the entrance to a village. They were standing far off because the law required it. They called out from a distance, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And Jesus looked at them, all 10 of them, standing together at the edge of the road, at the edge of the village, at the edge of everything, and he said, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." He did not touch them. He did not pray over them. He just gave them a direction. Go. And as they went, they were cleansed. Now here is what most people miss in this story. 10 men were healed. 1 came back. One turned around, came back to Jesus, threw himself at his feet, and thanked him with everything he had. And that one, the text tells us with a detail that lands like a quiet bomb, that one was a Samaritan. Jesus looked around and said, "Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" And then he said something remarkable. He said, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." But all 10 had been healed. All 10 had their skin restored. The difference, the thing Jesus is pointing to, is that the one who came back received something the other 9 did not. The 9 got their leprosy healed. The Samaritan got his life back. He got to look Jesus in the face. He got the words spoken over him directly. He got the moment of being seen, named, called up from the ground. Here is the pattern beginning to sharpen. Jesus does not just stop for the sick. He stops for the ones who have been told by society, by religion, by history that they do not fully belong. The Samaritan, the bleeding woman, the beggar on the road, and what he gives them is never just a physical healing. It is always underneath the physical healing a restoration of dignity, a reinstatement into the human community. And this is where it gets remarkable, because the next stop Jesus makes is for a man who does not even ask. John chapter 5, the pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate. Imagine it. 5 covered colonnades surrounding a large pool, and lying under those colonnades are a multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed. The tradition held that when the water stirred, the first person into the pool would be healed. So they waited, every day, watching the water. One man had been there for 38 years. 38 years. You need to sit with that number. Not 38 days. Not 38 weeks. 38 years of watching other people get into the pool first. 38 years of being the one who was always too slow, always without someone to help him, always arriving at the water's edge a moment too late. He had been sick longer than many of the people watching this have been alive. Jesus came to the pool, and of all the people lying there, the text says there was a multitude. He went to this man, not because the man called out to him, not because the man's friends had brought him and lowered him through a roof, not because of any act of faith or persistence on this man's part. The text says simply that Jesus saw him lying there and knew he had been in this condition a long time. And Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be healed?" It is one of the most surprising questions in the Gospels, and theologians have argued about it for centuries. Of course he wants to be healed. He has been there 38 years. But the man's answer tells you everything. He does not say yes. He says, "Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water stirs. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." 38 years of being passed by had not just damaged his body. It had reshaped how he saw himself. He did not answer the question, "Do you want to be healed?" with a yes. He answered it with an explanation for why healing was not possible for him. He had stopped believing in the category of yes. The only world he could see was the world where he was always too slow and always alone and always watching someone else get there first. Jesus did not argue with him, did not give him a motivational speech, did not explain the theology of faith and healing. He said, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." And the man was healed immediately. But it gets stranger, because Jesus did not stick around. The crowd did not even know a miracle had happened. The man himself did not know who had healed him. John tells us Jesus had slipped away into the crowd. He came to the pool, found the man no one else had noticed, said what needed to be said, and was gone before anyone thought to applaud. That detail is not accidental. John includes it because it proves something. Jesus did not stop for this man because of the crowd. He did not stop because there was social pressure or because it would make him look good. He stopped because he saw a man lying there who had been lying there for 38 years. And no one, not one person in 38 years had stopped to say, "Get up." If you are watching this and you feel like you have been waiting at the edge of something for years, waiting for a marriage to be restored, waiting for a diagnosis to change, waiting for someone to notice that you are still there, still trying, still lying by the pool, this story is for you. Jesus does not need you to have a great faith speech prepared. He does not need you to win the race to the water. He just needs you to be there, and he will find you. We are getting close to the moment this whole video has been building toward. But before we get there, I want you to see one more story that unlocks the entire pattern. John chapter 9. Jesus and his disciples are walking through Jerusalem. They pass a man who has been blind since birth. And the disciples, the men who had been following Jesus for months, the men who had watched him heal leper after leper, who had watched the bleeding woman healed, who had watched Bartimaeus receive his sight, those men stop and ask a question. Not, "Lord, will you heal him?" Not, "Can we bring him to you?" They look at this man sitting blind in the street and they ask, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" They are doing theology while a man sits in the dark. And Jesus does not answer the theology question. He says neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And then, without anyone asking, without the man calling out, without a single request being made, he knelt down, mixed dirt with his own saliva, put mud on the man's eyes, and sent him to wash in the pool of Siloam. The disciples asked a question about sin. Jesus gave a man his sight. Here is what you need to carry into the next story. Every single time, every single one of these 7 moments, there is a crowd present. And in every single moment, the crowd has a reason to keep moving. A theological reason, a legal reason, a social reason, a practical reason. The crowd is always too busy, too righteous, too careful, too late. Jesus never has a reason. He just stops. And he will do it again one more time in a way that is going to cost him something publicly. In a room full of people who are watching him very carefully, waiting for him to step out of line. It is the Sabbath. That detail matters more than almost anything else in this final story, and you need to feel the weight of it before we go any further. The Sabbath in first-century Judaism was not just a day off. It was the holiest day of the week, the day that marked the Jewish people as God's own, the day on which no work was to be done, the day that synagogue leaders took seriously enough to count and measure and enforce with careful precision. Healing on the Sabbath was considered work, and the religious leaders watching Jesus that day were not watching casually. They were watching the way a prosecutor watches a witness looking for the moment they could use. Jesus knew this, and he walked into the synagogue anyway. Luke chapter 13. Jesus is teaching, and in the crowd sitting in the back, or along the side, or wherever women sat in that synagogue, there is a woman. She has been bent over for 18 years. The Greek word Luke uses is sukupto, bent double, unable to straighten up. For 18 years she has seen the world from waist height. She has not looked anyone in the face in 18 years. She has not stood tall in 18 years. She came to the synagogue that Sabbath not to ask for anything. There is no indication she even knew Jesus was there. She just came the way she came every week, bent over, invisible, sitting in the back of a room full of people who had long since stopped seeing her. Jesus saw her. He stopped his teaching, called her forward, in front of the synagogue leader, in front of the crowd, in front of the people who were already watching him for violations. He called this woman, this bent-over, invisible, forgotten woman, to the front of the room, and he said, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." He laid his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. The synagogue leader was furious. He stood up and said to the crowd, not even directly to Jesus, because perhaps he did not dare, "There are 6 days for work. Come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." And Jesus turned to him and said, "You hypocrite, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" Daughter of Abraham. In a world where women were rarely named in public religious discourse, Jesus gave this unnamed, bent-over woman a title. He called her a daughter of the covenant. He placed her publicly, in front of the synagogue leader, in front of the whole crowd, inside the lineage of promise, inside the family of God. She came in invisible. She left standing straight with a title. Now step back. Look at all 7. Bartimaeus, told by the crowd to be silent. Jesus stopped. The man with leprosy required by law to keep his distance and announce his own uncleanliness. Jesus reached out and touched him. The bleeding woman tried to take the smallest possible thing and disappear. Jesus stopped the crowd and called her daughter. The 10 men with leprosy standing far off at the edge of 2 worlds that hated each other. Jesus called them close. The man at Bethesda, 38 years of being passed by. So long he had stopped believing healing was possible for him. Jesus came to him, the man born blind, while his own disciples argued about whose sin caused the blindness. Jesus knelt in the dirt and put mud on his eyes. The woman bent double, invisible, in the back of a room for 18 years, on a day when healing could cost Jesus everything politically. Jesus called her to the front. 7 stops, 7 people. And in every single case, every single one, the crowd had a reason. The crowd always had a reason. Be quiet. You are disrupting the journey. Keep your distance. The law requires it. Do not make a scene. This is not the time. We are on our way somewhere important. This is not the right day. There are 6 other days for this. The crowd always had a reason. Jesus never did. And this is the thing that should stop you cold, right where you are sitting. Because if you have been telling yourself that God is too busy for what you are carrying, if you have been telling yourself that your problem is too small, your faith too thin, your past too complicated, your timing too inconvenient, you need to look at this list again. The Greek word the gospel writers reach for over and over when they describe what Jesus felt in these moments is splanchnisomai, gut-level compassion. Not the compassion of someone who tolerates your interruption, not the compassion of someone who fits you in between more important appointments. The compassion of someone who feels your pain in his body before his mind even processes it. The compassion of someone for whom your suffering is never an inconvenience. He felt it for a blind beggar on a busy road. He felt it for a woman who had not been touched in 12 years. He felt it for a man who had been lying in the same spot for so long he had stopped asking to be moved. He feels it for you. Here is what I want you to take away from everything we have covered today. First, Jesus did not just heal bodies, he restored dignity. Every single person on this list had not just a physical condition, they had a social wound. They had been told, in one way or another, to stay back, stay quiet, stay invisible, stay small. And every single time, what Jesus gave them was not just physical healing. It was a public restoration, a calling forward, a new daughter, a son, a person seen. Second, the crowd is not your enemy, but it is not your guide either. The crowd in these stories is not made up of villains. They were ordinary people following ordinary rules. But ordinary rules told them to keep moving, and Jesus stopped. If you are waiting for the crowd around you to give you permission to believe that God sees you, you are going to wait a long time. He does not wait for the crowd. He moves against it when he has to. Third, and this is the one I want you to carry with you when you close this video, who is calling out from the side of your road? Because the thing about these 7 stories is that after each one, the person who was healed did not stay sitting in the dust. They followed. They returned with thanks. They praised God. They stood up straight. And the people who watched them, the crowd that had said, "Be quiet, keep your distance. This is not the right day," those people were left astonished. You were not made to keep walking past the person calling out. You were made to stop. The way he stopped. If this video reached you at the right moment, if something in these 7 stories landed where you needed it to land, I want to invite you to do something simple before you close it. Leave one comment below. Tell us which story hit you hardest, because someone is going to read your comment on a day when they need to know they are not the only one who has been sitting by the road. Subscribe if you have not already. We put out videos like this every week long. Careful, scripture-rooted explorations of the moments in the Bible that the world rushes past. And if you want to go deeper on the miracles of Jesus, the video in the corner of your screen right now goes through every recorded miracle in order, all of them, in chronological sequence, with the historical and scriptural context that most people never hear. Thank you for spending 35 minutes with this. Go find someone to stop for this week. Let's pray. Lord, we have spent this time looking at 7 people who were told to stay back and a Savior who never once agreed with the crowd. Remind us today that you have not agreed with any voice that has told us we are too much or not enough for you to stop for, and give us eyes to see who you are asking us to stop for. Amen.